An elderly gentleman quietly kneeling in a pew, whispering prayers to a God he has known and loved since he was a little boy or a young man, is a loud and powerful expression of faith. And perhaps we have seen this in our own parents or grandparents, this example of faith, the way they have participated in the church and have encouraged their children and grandchildren to do the same, their gentle witness to prayer, a rosary or Bible kept by their rocking chair, and their celebration of holy days among family and friends. But as this generation grows older, they not only have to accept some of the debilitating stages of aging, such as illness or lessened mobility or impaired hearing or vision, but they must consider the effect of these stages on their faith life. Maybe they can't walk to church every day or attend Mass on Sunday. They may have difficulty reading the small print of their Bible or hearing the priest deliver his homily. So when we look at ways of caring for the elderly in their retirement and their aging, whether it is a retirement home, home care nurses, or inviting an aging family member into your own home, an essential element to consider is which option is consistent with the faith life of that individual. What will help this person grow closer to God in the last and very important stages of life? In this episode of Catholic Focus, we consider a few of many options and discussions that come with aging gracefully. We begin by speaking with Teresa Hartnett, Program Director with the Family Ministry Office in the Diocese of Hamilton. Well, thank you very much, Teresa, for joining us today.
Thank you.
I think being close to someone who is aging is a unique opportunity. We get to see how they're maybe using their time and their talents in this different stage of life, but it also might be a frustrating time for that individual and for the family members as we see them not being able to do what they used to do, not being able to keep up with their normal activities. So what are some of the signs that these family members can watch for in an aging relative?
I think one of the things, first of all, is that the closer you are to an aging parent, we know that the harder it is to recognize the signs because you're with them all the time and you might miss things. So one of the good keys is to ask neighbors, other people that don't see them so often, if they've noticed any differences in them. But the subtle signs, of course, are forgetting, that they're not maybe keeping up with their hygiene, things that you would notice sort of off the bat. Someone who's always been very good at cleaning their house, suddenly the house is not so clean. Right. You look at the food in the fridge, are they eating if you're seeing them regularly? If you're not seeing them regularly, it's probably important to have someone else who might be checking in on those things to see how they might be doing.
Right. That's probably something that no one wants to admit, neither the person that's aging nor the person who loved them, just because they want them to continue on normally. Is that correct?
It's correct, and actually, in fact, the research shows that it's not unusual for the children or caregivers of the elderly people to feel often angry with them for their now lacking in ability. And they don't really recognize that, but it's just because seeing our parents age is a symbolic that we will age as well. And we are used to them being our caregivers, and so to switch roles becomes difficult for some people. Sometimes it happens subtly, but for many it's difficult.
So there's also some decisions that need to be made now too, as we're seeing someone age and not being able to do the things that they normally would. And that's in terms of who's going to continue to give them care. We could look at retirement homes, at-home nurses, or even inviting that family member to move in with you to take care of them there. So what are some of the points to consider when you're looking at that big decision to make?
Well, I think you've touched on the three. I think, first of all, independence is very important to most elderly people, and that the decision should not be made in isolation of the person themselves, unless they're incapable of thinking, which with dementia, maybe Alzheimer's, some of those things they aren't capable of making the decisions, but most are not incapable of making those decisions. So it would be to sit down and express concerns and how we're going to deal with them. Some people will be resistant at first, but it's important to make it a what are we going to do in this particular stage. And to start early, I think one of the mistakes we make is we often see our elderly parents as time goes on being less capable, but we wait to say, have you thought about perhaps moving out of the house? because the sooner they move into an environment that they are capable of being in, so a one-floor plan, say, as opposed to a two-story house, the easier it will be for them to get used to it. The older a person gets, the more difficult change becomes.
Right.
So it's one thing to start early. I think the consideration has to be on the part of the family. They have to think very clearly about what they can do. One of the biggest problems we have in terms of dealing with elderly parents is a sense of guilt. We love our parents, they looked after us, we should look after them. Maybe they've expressed a desire never to be in a nursing home, but now you know they need that. And people have to think about their own lifestyle. How present will somebody be in the home to this elderly person? They'll be better off probably where peers are around in a senior's setting, where there's activities planned for them, where someone may be able to look after their medical needs. Having someone in your home because they can't look after themselves in their own home, there's considerations. Who will help and assist them with bathing and those sorts of issues?
Now, when we're looking at some of the physical needs, what about spiritual needs? I think we want to consider the faith life of that individual as well, and what is going to help them continue living that same life that they've had within the church. There could be some difficulties there too. They may not be attending Mass anymore because they can't get to it. So how do we take those things into consideration and offer that as part of their continued lifestyle?
First, I think it's probably very important to many elderly. I think the later on in life people come, of course, the natural connection to death coming sooner becomes, their spiritual nature sort of rises to the surface, if you will. So even those who may not have been overly religious become more so, but many are religious and have, as you said, attended daily Mass. I think we want to put into place some things for them. First of all, on TV now, most of them can get Mass several times a day, helping them know what channels that's on, helping them know where they can make that connection, and also that Mass on TV is a viable source of spirituality. Some of them think, if I'm watching on TV, I'm not attending Mass. Contacting their parish and asking for the Eucharist to be brought. Most parishes have a ministry in place for that and will come to the home. Also, I think if you're looking at a nursing home, most nursing homes have spiritual directors, pastoral workers who come in. They run services and liturgies, not always Mass, but almost every nursing home does connect with a church, and they have Mass at least once a month. So again, if they're in that setting, making sure that those people who are running that home know the needs of your parent. And perhaps before you would place them in a particular home, check and see what do you do for the spiritual life of the people in your residence. For some people it may not be important, but for others it would be important.
When should we be having this conversation with the people that we love, that you know, we're all going to get older? So when do we have this conversation to say what it is you might want for your future? Yeah,
we're not good at being aging, and we're not good at death and dying. We don't talk to people. We'd rather not. And I think we have to have the conversation about both early on. So somewhere around 60 or 65, those conversations should begin happening, because that's a time when most people are very healthy. Most people do not need that kind of care. So what does care look like for you in the elderly? What is it you hope to have? Again, expectations have to be made clear. If a parent says, I never want to go into a nursing home, I'm hoping one of you children will let me live with you, and your lifestyle does not allow that, there's other complications in relationship occasionally, it has to be made clear that that's probably not viable, and here's the reasons why, so that that's not in their mind as an option. A lot of people, like talking about death, will avoid that conversation. Their parents say, I want to live with one of you. Everybody kind of looks at each other, but nobody actually says it's not going to happen. And there may be relationship issues. I mean, parents and children love each other, but sometimes they don't always get along 100%. So all of those things have to be taken into consideration.
I understand that you have led some workshops on for people that are caring for elderly. What are some of their concerns that they're bringing up?
Well, the interesting concern is themselves. We can lose ourselves in caring for others, and we can lose our sense of family. So most people who are caring for elderly also have children, whether they be young or teenagers or even in their early 20s. In the cost of looking after an elderly parent, they give up their family life, and that would be a mistake. That's why the parameters need to be set. What can I do realistically, And I think we have to be respectful. We can't be selfish about it. Well, I'm never going to do anything. So I'm not suggesting that we decide, oh, our life has to be in a certain way. We might have to give up some things to support our parent. But at the same time, we have to make sure that our own lives are controlled, that we don't become burned out, that we don't get ill because we're looking after an elderly parent. So the concerns often are less about their elderly parent, because people do find in their communities help for that. But it's the concern of, what about me? I'm dealing with my children, I'm dealing with my parents, I'm working, and now I have no time for myself. And that's a danger to both mental and spiritual health of the individual.
And are you also hearing the concerns of the elderly parent? Are you able to voice some of their concerns?
I have spoken to a few. The elderly parent's concern, interestingly enough, is about the loss of control. I think on occasion we make a mistake of reverting to the parental role for our parents. We have to keep our roles clear. If you are a caregiver because your parent is maybe incapable of making decisions, we still have to realize that they are our elders. So while we're making caregiving decisions, we don't have to make a decision about what they wear and what they eat, and we have to allow them some dignity in that. So for the elderly, it's fear of loss of control, and for many of them, fear of being a burden.
So because this is a discussion that people don't necessarily want to have, and it's a decision that's very hard to make, how can we let God's grace come into this so that neither party is feeling guilty or burdened, but that we're just letting the process happen?
The commandment says honor your father or mother, and I think it's a good commandment. I think we have to honor our parents, but it does not say give your own life for your parents in that sense. So I think we have to be realistic about what we can do. Parents, because they are elderly and may not have as much in their own lives as they used to, can become very demanding, and we have to make that line between giving into the demands and giving into what would be honoring them clear. And we have to know that in our own minds. When we do things out of guilt, we begin to feel angry and resentful, and our time spent with our parents will not be what it should be. So we have to find a balance so that when we are with our parents, our time is joyful, is well spent, and certainly at times it will require the graces of the Holy Spirit, because as they age, they can be forgetful, they can repeat their stories, all of those things can happen. But in reality, the best advice people would have is from those who have lost parents, that when they're gone, they're gone. And so this time will never be forgotten or regretted. And so the patience of the years will pay off perhaps when they have died and you have had those memories and that time with them.
Well, thank you very much, Teresa, for sharing this wisdom, this insight, and helping us all age a little bit more gracefully.
Thank you.
One of the options discussed with Teresa was the possibility of finding a retirement home that will meet the faith needs of an individual. We were invited to visit one such home, Marion Residence, in Cambridge, Ontario.
That's me. That's my husband and that's myself. Yeah. My hair was darker then. Yeah. It was the most beautiful day. Yeah. Didn't rain, the sun was shining. I got married at Sacred Heart Church.
Jane Solomon's wedding day was many years ago, but she is quick to remember the many details of the church, her dress, her smiling husband, the memories and the pictures of her wedding, her family, and all 91 years of her life surround her in her room at Marion Residence.
I've been here about not quite a year. Yeah, soon be a year. I like it very much, yeah. I mean, I can sit here and not worry about anything. All the people here are my friends, yeah.
Jane is one among almost 50 residents who call Marion Residence home. Founded by the Sisters of Our Lady Immaculate as part of their apostolate to care for the elderly, the Catholic retirement home offers private rooms, places to gather, and opportunities to pray.
The opportunity to practice Christian life here, because they live in community with us and with others, other people of their age, and then they share their faith together, and that is a wonderful experience for them. They don't feel alone anymore, and they share their joys and sufferings too with their neighbor.
Come on, Judy. Good job!
The activities includes the body and the soul. There are exercises, games, there are crafts, activities, and also spiritual activities like the Mass, the Way of the Cross, the Rosary every day, and the devotion to the Divine Mercy. We're created with a soul and body, and then it's part of our personality, it's part of our being. And like the body, if you don't give food to the body, what happens? It becomes sick. The same for the soul. We need the food of the sacraments, grace. We need the prayer life in community. And that is our spiritual food. Without that, our soul suffers too much.
The care for the soul is one of the reasons Betty Bolger is happy at Marion Residence. She has been living here for a year and a half and working part-time as receptionist.
The events that happened to bring me here were really, now as I look back, were really providential. I never thought of being in a residence where we have sisters. Never thought it was such a thing, that you could practice your faith even much more readily. I tell you what I find more than anything, it is the feeling of a family at last. You're not alone. There isn't that loneliness that you can experience when you're living alone, and I have experienced that. And since I've come here, I've noticed there's always someone ready to talk to you or listen to you.
Though given the tools and the space to practice their faith, the decision to enter a retirement home is undoubtedly difficult for both the individual and the family. No longer do they have their own home, their own space. But the family of Mary King also says that that does not mean you don't have your own life.
Oh yes, the independence is still there. Mary pretty well is her own person. She has never had that taken away from her. She still comes and goes as she pleases. She gets her hair done now every week, which is nothing different to what was going on when she was at home. The decision to put Mary in Marion Residence place was mainly because of her health. She was starting to be very depressed at home. We noticed when we would go over. She would sit there and she wouldn't say anything to us, and she was being very withdrawn. You'd go in the house different times and she'd be sleeping, and you could stand there 5 minutes or so before she even knew you were there. And the fact that she had steps in her house made us really, really nervous. Although being very hard for both of us, we felt that we really were going to do the right decision, and hopefully down the line that it would end up being the proper one. I can remember sitting at home one night and I was really having mixed feelings and emotional feelings about putting Mary here, knowing that we took her out of her house. I'm sitting in my house with no worries. But she phoned me one night, and it was 10 o'clock. And with having an elderly parent left and Mary, telephone's ringing at that time of the night. It's a little scary. So I picked the phone up, and it was Mary on the other end. And I could not believe how excited she was. To hear Mary so excited, it just broke my heart. Because she phoned to let me know that the sisters were so good to her up here, and she was so happy about being here and being looked after by them. She said she didn't feel that she deserved all the help that they offer. Mary loved to go to church every day. She went to Mass every Sunday. She was to the point that she wasn't getting there now. She came here, she got her faith back, and that was so important to all of us.
I go every day, say the rosary, and go to the Mass after that.
According to the sisters, the reason for the care of the soul, the commitment to prayer, and the dedication to each resident is this.
It's a preparation also for the future life that we believe as Christians. Then, especially when we are in the age of being close to death, it's very important, this preparation. And they recognize that they need to prepare themselves. And it's wonderful to hear them to say, oh, it's so nice to pray together. I feel so much peace here.
Many families may enter the debate among themselves. What is best for our aging relative? Retirement home or at-home care? While each has its benefits and disadvantages, our next guest, Angela Cameron, can tell you that the decision for which is best sometimes just falls into place.
My mother lived with us over the period of approximately 10 years with Alzheimer's, and then my father lived with us for approximately 2 months after a stroke and then went into a retirement home.
As her parents grew older, Angela Cameron felt the decision for their care happened naturally, progressively. In line with her European background and upbringing, she felt that caring for her mom and dad in her home was the most genuine option.
It was something that just sort of fell into place. My mother developed Alzheimer's, and because it's such a gradual disease, you find yourself making concessions that you don't even realize that you're making. So I found myself gradually spending more and more time with my mother, doing more and more things in the home for her without really realizing, because it was just such a gradual situation. And eventually, as she became less able to do things for herself, she spent more time in the home with myself.
As for Angela's father, Nick, the Cameron family was also ready to welcome him into their home a few years later.
After his stroke, he had spent 2 months with us in our home, and he just found that he couldn't deal with the busyness of the household with the children and the doorbell, the phone ringing, the movement in the house. So it was his decision to go into a home. It was a retirement home, so he could still come and go and take taxis to visit people and to his business. And so it was almost like a seniors living apartment type of a thing, but as time went on, he did need a lot more care, and they were able to provide that for him.
While the decisions on what sort of care her parents would receive was relatively easy, Angela admits that the adjustment and responsibilities were difficult.
It does change your relationship. You feel like you become the parent. And my daughters were quite young when my mother began living with us, and it was difficult. It was like having another child in some regard. You begin to feel that your life is normal the way you're living it, but in reality, you are doing things much differently than you would normally do. For example, I had to have two-way locks on the doors because she would wander, and I had to, as she went through different phases with Alzheimer's and the children became a little older, she became aggressive with them, and I had to keep them separated. You're up during the night because they sort of get their days and nights mixed up, and they're up during the night getting dressed again, thinking that it's a time to start the day over again, and without thinking, you just go and dress them into their night clothes and put them back to bed, and you just become so involved in the caregiving that you lose the sense of what normal life would be for your families. During the time that I looked after her, the positive aspects were, I think it really taught my children a sense of compassion. They would help me bathe my mother, they would help me dress my mother, they would help me with her care, so I involved them in her care as well, and I think it taught them to be compassionate and loving towards the elderly.
As her conditions worsened, Angela's mother, Lena, was placed in a nursing home at the decision of a neurologist.
The whole time I had my mother, I felt that it was a privilege and an honor to look after her. I enjoyed the time that I had with her.
Angela's parents have since passed away, her mother, Lena, in 1998, and her father in 2006. She appreciates the moments she had with her parents, whether it was helping her mother at home or visiting her father in his retirement home.
It was an experience that I'll never forget and I'll never regret, looking after my mother specifically. I wish that I hadn't have felt as much guilt that I had looking in hindsight. I believe now that I did the best that I could to balance family and my mother. I don't know that I would have really changed anything, because as much as I did feel that it was difficult on my family, I think we learned a lot, and I think we may be a lot closer now because of the time that we shared caregiving as a family.
Just as we are cared for physically and spiritually throughout our entire life, that is what we need in our old age in order to age gracefully. Perhaps that is what we all hope for and what we can provide for others: happy moments and peaceful opportunities to grow closer to God. For more information on this episode of Catholic Focus, please email us at focus@saltandlighttv.org. Thanks for watching.